Mel, hi there. Sport is a huge part of Cork heritage, and recently you celebrated a unique landmark, 40 years since you set the land record. Perhaps you just tell me, who is Mel Nolan?
Mel Nolan is a guy very interested in motorcycling who has raced for years, both at home and internationally, particularly on the drag race scene. I would be best known for holding the Irish land speed record and for having the good luck to have broken world speed records on 3 different occasions.
Right, I suppose if we start at the very beginning, you had I suppose what one could consider a very strange introduction to motorsport as a child, and maybe you were a bit inquisitive, to say the least.
Yeah, it started very young, Martin. I can remember when I was about 5 years of age, waking up one morning very early, must have been 5:30, 6:30, and hearing this unbelievable racket at the end of our road. I lived in Magazine Road in Cork, and I called my father, asked him what it was, and of course it happened to be the practice session for the Munster 100 road races, which were taking place in Cork round the circuit of the Carrigrohane Straight, Victoria Cross, Denis Cross, and out to Ballincollig where the hairpin bend was. So I wasn't going to sit there and leave all that stuff go. I was obviously too inquisitive as a kid, so I dragged my father out to Denis Cross and saw these incredible men on motorcycles with their pudding bowl helmets whizzing around at high speeds, and I was hooked instantly.
Cork, as we said, has a great sporting heritage. Motorsport is part of that, and it's uniquely very, very rich. You have people like yourself, and in rallying you have Billy Coleman, not to mention just an icon of Irish rallying. But you parked up the motorsport interest for a while, and you went off to music and things like that. So, very different scene. Very different scene
altogether. Yeah, in the 60s. I got into guitar playing and music. It was the swinging 60s, so I had a big part in that, travelling all over the country. And it was quite by accident that I came into motorcycling, because my family had no background in motorsport. We didn't even have a car at that stage. And it came about because of my work. I worked in Blackpool, and it meant me taking 2 buses a day, which was a crazy way to go to work.
Of course, music was the pastime, but you were very serious when it came to your academic life, and you took a chemical line?
Yeah, I took a chemical line. I had a diploma in chemical technology and chemical engineering, and I worked as an industrial chemist at Harrington's Paints in Cork, which is now Dulux Paints, and I was lucky enough to get into the industrial section of that, which meant I dealt a lot with the car industry. We supplied the paints for all the cars that were made in Ireland. There were actually 12 car factories in Ireland in the 60s and 70s.
Roughly what year was that, Mel, when you began work?
I began work in 1963.
And I gather initially your transport was buses and whatever, until you got a few bob?
Well, it was because I hadn't a few bob that I did this, really, because I was spending so much money on buses. So the Honda 50s had come into Ireland in about 1960, 62, that way. And I reckon the Honda 50 was the best way for me to go to work. So down I went to Ross's Motorcycles in Pembroke Street in Cork, put down my £2.50 deposit on the motorcycle, which cost £89, and off I went. I learned a big lesson very, very quickly.
What was that?
The first one was a safety lesson. I was scratching for the money. The bike was bought on the Never Never. I took the bike home, told nobody, arrived home with a brand new Honda, and the first thing my father said, "Where's your helmet?" And of course I had no helmet. You could drive without a helmet at that stage. So I had no money to buy a helmet either. So my father said to me, "Get back down straight away to the shop, buy the best helmet in the shop." Down I went with the £5 from my father and spent the whole £5 on the helmet,
right,
which was an American-style jet helmet, a really good one, which had just come out at the time. And unfortunately, I had to put the helmet to the test after only 9 weeks.
Yeah, you obviously got confident for the first few weeks, but one morning everything came to a sudden stop.
It did, yeah. Funny thing about the motorcycle, I was so careful with it, Martin. It had to be run in for 500 miles, and it was run in as careful as you could possibly get. And then the big day came. What would she do? So I took the bike where the straight road, of course, in Cork, where everybody goes to test everything, see how quick it is. Out I went, head down, flat out, helmet on, out the straight road, flat, 42 miles an hour. That was my opening gambit with high speed.
And of course, there was no speed camera in sight.
No, thanks
Not those days. But I gather one morning near Blackpool Church you had a little escapade.
Yeah,
Tell me about that,
I came to a dead halt when I made a beautiful V into the front of some unfortunate man's Morris Minor, passed over the thing, my head hopped off the bonnet and I landed in a heap behind the Morris Minor. So the helmet, I got the £5 worth from the helmet on that day.
You certainly did. I suppose your interest in bikes then became more serious and you moved on a bit, didn't you?
I moved on in bikes, yeah. I was crazy interested in that stage, looking at all the race results in the Isle of Man, and Hondas and Yamahas and Suzukis and everything were coming to the fore at that stage. And I never even thought of racing myself. I was dead interested, but never even thought of racing.
You purchased the Honda 450, and that was a big bike at the time. And I suppose for somebody that wasn't interested in racing, it was a rather strange move, but I think you got a little bit of encouragement then at some event. Tell me about that.
I did, yeah. I was at a motor car event in Ellis Quarry in Ovens, and in the pub afterwards, all the guys there who raced cars and motorcycles were there, and they were looking at the bike and said, "Oh, you should race that thing." And they said, "Yeah, the Munster Speed weekend is on next week. Why don't you come out and have a go?" So yeah.
At that time, I suppose people interested in rallying and people interested in motorbikes, they were all involved with the Munster Motorcycle and Car Club, which had its headquarters in Vernon in that great building that unfortunately has been burned down since. But did you travel up to what people used to call the hill?
Absolutely, yeah. I was in the Munster Club for years. I'm actually still a member of the Veteran and Vintage Club that still remains, and at that time I was told, get out and race the 450, see what it'll do.
So when did it happen? And I presume the venue was in County Cork.
Yeah, the venue was on the straight road in Cork. So I went out to that race, and I was on the start line for that race when this other crazy guy arrived next to me.
Right.
A guy called Denis Collins, who became my lifelong friend starting from that day, and he had a huge part in my exploits on the bike and building bikes from then on as well.
I suppose there's one thing that people probably may not understand, but in motorcycling, while you have your competitors, your rival, there's also great camaraderie between everybody.
Oh, it's fantastic, yeah. Like you make lifelong friends in motorsport, particularly on the motorcycling end. Everybody helps everybody else. If you're short apart and somebody else has it, they just give it to you straight away. Very, very great atmosphere, yeah.
You combined, the road racing or, the sprint type thing with road racing and with circuit racing as well. But, road racing is obviously very dangerous because you have all different elements, but compared to circuit racing in Mondello Park, which you participated in, what do you think are the main differences between circuit racing and the road racing? And are some people cut out for road racing as opposed to circuit racing?
Yeah, well, some people are bred into road racing, and road racing is fantastic and really exciting. It is the most exciting racing of all, without any doubt, and the skills of the riders are absolutely fantastic. The circuit racing allows people to get a foothold on the sport. It's a much safer environment. It's fantastic racing. There's no quarter given. But if you happen to fall off the bike, or any incident happens, at least you've got space to operate in. You've got grass, you've got gravel, you've got safety precautions that you can never take on a road, and it gets people started in the sport, and most people stay at that level.
When you look at field sports like Gaelic games, football, hurling and soccer, and Cork has again a rich heritage in that, and they have some great stars and currently. Do you think people really appreciate the skills of a motorcyclist, particularly in road racing? Or do they just see the guy going from A to B as fast as he can, but it's not really that, it's much, much more?
Oh, it's much more. Like, for anybody watching a road race live, like it cannot fail to take your breath away. The speed, the daring, the skill of the riders is second to none. There is no sport that I know of that challenges anybody so much as road racing.
Of course, I've seen this with features on the Dunlops, over the years, and the one thing that they come out with straight away is that the minute they put on the helmet, they say, well, I am in my zone. Tell me, what is that zone?
Yeah, it's on your own, and you're just focused. You're focused on where you're going, what you're doing, what's going on around you has very little to do with it. You're focused.
Are you thinking ahead, or is it just at that precise moment, or is it both?
It's both. It's both. Yeah, you're looking a long way ahead, because with the speed you have to look a long way ahead. What's to the sides of you is only a blur, but you're looking a long way ahead, and you're totally focused. There is no way that you can do anything on earth that'll focus you more than a motorcycle at high speed.
Motorsport is, by its very nature, is dangerous, but when you are travelling at flat out speeds, are you nervous, or is there a fear, or do both of them combine to actually make you go faster?
There's no fear. There's no nerves when you're on the bike. You're just totally focused on what you're doing.
But how do you overcome fear? I mean, to the ordinary person watching the race, they will feel the fear, and they will nearly shudder with the bikes coming and passing them or whatever. But you're totally in. We go back to say you're totally in the zone.
You're totally in the zone. Like, I would have the same fear looking at people. When I watch people racing, I would have the same fear that you described. Not for me, but for the guys on the bikes, obviously. But when you're racing yourself, there's no fear. Absolutely none. Just concentration, where you're going, what you're doing.
I get the impression that you probably have a nervousness, but that would be in the lead up to the event. But on the day itself, you're probably the coolest guy in town, are you?
Absolutely. Yeah, my setup was, if you go back 4 or 5 days before a race, you wouldn't want to come near me. I'd be on a knife edge completely. But when it comes to the day of the race, I would be the coolest guy there. Absolutely no nerves. Going to the start line, absolutely no nerves. You have a job to do, get out and do it.
You probably had a unique advantage as well compared to other riders and other motorcyclists or whatever, because of your engineering background. That taught you something else as well. I suppose it was a huge positive to bring to the table.
Yeah, well, when I was in drag racing and in speed records, building the engines was everything. When you came to the speed record side of it, the building of the bike, unless you did it yourself, you couldn't break the record, because there was no bike that you could buy would go fast enough, basically. So it started from the premise that you had to build your own motorcycle.
What actually led you to say, right, I'm going to have a crack at this land speed record? Where did that initiative come from, or dare I say, where did the breakneck issue come from?
Well, where it came from basically is I was building motorcycles during the 70s, and I went from a 2-stroke 500cc Kawasaki triple, which was very highly tuned, and then decided to change to a 4-stroke machine, which I was going to build for road racing. So I started to build this Honda, It started with a crashed Honda 750, CB750 K2 model, and took the engine out of that and looked around for parts with which to build the engine. Was lucky enough to get a lightweight Honda Piper Formula One frame, which was a fantastic piece of kit. You can see it on the bike today when you look at it. And I got bits of all different things. The mag wheels were Peter Williams. They were the first magnesium wheels ever built for motorbikes. They came off the John Player Norton. There were Triumph front forks. There was a Dunstall fairing. There was bits and pieces, Lockheed brakes from everywhere. But the bike came together very well, and I went to start it as a race bike.
Of course, that was in the era of no mobile phones, so it wasn't that easy to make contact with people. So you were relying on the ordinary phone to ring up guys. But the frame of the bike, maybe tell me where that came from. Or how did you source it?
The frame was built by Piper in England, and I happened to see it for sale on Motorcycle News in the small ads, and picked up the landline at that stage and got the deal done. So that was the frame. That was the starting part. I had a frame then for the engine. The rest went on from there. So I built the bike as a 750 bike, and I can remember I tuned the engine then as well. Like these things revved to about 9,000 RPM at the time, but my one revved to 12,000 RPM. And I can remember the first event I brought it to was a sprint event, and I went off down the first run. The bike did 152 miles an hour at the end of the sprint, which was an incredible speed for a 750 at that stage. And nobody would believe the bike was doing 152 miles an hour. All the other riders, couldn't. So I did it 3 more times, and then they believed it.
You had the ability, you had the ambition, but that's not really enough. Costs were a huge factor, but I think you got lucky with sponsors.
I had a great sponsor. That's where my friend Denis Collins came back into it again. Denis was the super salesman and got us a super sponsor with Noel Murphy and National Aluminium, who were a nationwide aluminium windows company at the time, and they were very enthusiastic about the project. At that stage, we were approaching land speed record stuff. So the proposal we put to them is that we would go and break the land speed record. And they jumped at the opportunity, and it was a great combination. So we were able to go and do that.
Yes, as you say, they were a national brand, because I think at the same time they also got involved in rallying. They sponsored the Fastnet Rally down in Skibbereen in West Cork for a time as well. So I think that was probably on the back of your success. But why? Was it an obsession nearly even at that time, or was it something that you wanted to put your name to?
Well, it was something I hadn't thought about at the time, but there was a land speed record attempt happening in Cork, and it was the second attempt that happened within 2 years. First of all, you had Danny Keeney and Rosemary Smith, who came to the straight road in Cork, and Rosemary set a record for cars, which was 155 miles an hour, and Danny set a record for motorcycles, which became the overall Irish land speed record at the time, which was 160 miles an hour. And I read about that. I didn't actually see it, but I read about it, and I was interested. And the following year, Danny Keeney came back again, this time up against an Arrows Formula One car driven by Vivian Candy. And I said, I'm going to go out and see this and have a look. So out I went anyway. Danny set a new bike record at 167 miles an hour, I think it was. And Vivian Candy came in with the Formula One car at 169 miles an hour. So Candy with the Formula One car had the Irish land speed record then.
Of course, they were all dubs as far as I know, and I suppose there's nothing rankles better with a Corkman is that to take something off a dub, and obviously very proud you wanted to do something like that, so you didn't really have to look too far to say, right, I'm going to have a crack at this.
Yeah, well, when I was sitting on the wall that day, I decided, yes, I can do this. At that stage, my Honda was up to 164 miles an hour. So I knew with further tuning, I could easily go faster than these guys. Yeah.
Right, you got the bike up to 164 miles an hour, but that wasn't enough. You knew you needed a bit more. So how would you go? How would you set about getting it quicker?
Well, when I was sitting on the wall that day deciding, yes, I could do this, along comes a man from the past, Mr. Denis Collins, again. So I knew I needed assistance to do this job because it's a very big project. And I said to Denis, I can do this. I'm going to beat this. I'm going to do it next year. I'm going to do it. Will you help me? So the answer, of course, was yes, immediately. So the combination of the two of us decided to move forward together. So we planned the bike to get the speed up, and we decided we'd build the first turbo bike in Ireland at the time. That we turbocharged the bike to make the power, and then we added one extra into it. We said we'd power it with nitrous oxide as well, so we'd have turbo and nitrous. And we set about that, designed what we were going to do, and built the bike. And we had the bike running the following year, early the following year, for some testing. And it came together nicely, and we came to the stage then where we felt we could run a decent speed and beat what was there. And at that stage then Dennis approached the sponsors. We got the sponsors in behind us, and we challenged for the land speed record.
I suppose the authorities wanted to have this because it was going to profile the city and the county.
Yeah, it was a massive event for the city, and the authorities gave us every cooperation. It was really fantastic. We had to get road closing orders from both the council and the corporation at that time, and everybody cooperated well, and the event was brought back to Cork City again.
Right. In preparation for that, was the course brushed and made sure that there was absolutely not even a loose chip anywhere?
Yeah, the people spent all day and all night the day before and worked right through the night. This was an early morning event. The road closing was from 4 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock. So people worked through the night, brushing and preparing the road. And we had one problem area, which was we had actually two separate roads. One was organised by the corporation, Cork Corporation. Yes. The other was Cork County Council. Cork Corporation had resurfaced the road, so half the road was resurfaced, and half the road was the old broken concrete, which was there since the 1920s. But where the two roads came together, there was quite a drop. There was a drop of about 4 inches from one to the other. So that was a big problem, because I'd have been hitting that at over 180, 190 miles an hour at the time, and a home-built motorbike. Yes. And that was the danger area. But we had a lucky break. Like Billy Ellis, who had Ellis's Quarry and Tarmac Adam and everything at the moment, was a member of the Munster Motorcycling Car Club. And he came out in the middle of the night and put down a beautiful sloping wedge into the road for me to pass over.
Again, I suppose that comes back to the camaraderie within the Munster Motorcycling Car Club at the time, and I suppose everybody was on board for the project. But the day of the event then? Everything
started nicely. Dennis dragged me out of bed at 4:15. We got down there, and my idea was we'd start running at 4:30, which we did. First run was a test run for the bike. You have to remember that we couldn't test at high speed anywhere. Yeah. I had the bike actually registered for the public roads, so the only way we could run the engines in and things like that was to drive them on the public road, and obviously we couldn't go mad. So our only hope for top speed runs was on the day. We had to hope that all the calculations were right, everything we thought was correct. So went off in the first run on the bike, which was a test run, which I probably went off at about 170, 175 miles an hour. Got to the end of the road, the engine was glowing red, and I looked down and thought we were finished. too much heat. The engine I was going to melt the pistons in the engine. It was glowing red. So we had a powwow. Made adjustments to the motor, and made a run back. This would have been west to east. Flew down the road. Everything worked fantastically well. Through the lights, 180 miles an hour. Great. I was miles over the record, more than 10 miles an hour over the record, and it was a great run as far as I was concerned. I could keep doing that all day. Well, Danny Keeney made a run then. His run was 171 miles an hour, so I was well ahead. I was dead happy. Made my return run outwards, just as quick, if not quicker, as the run in. Got to the end of the road to find I had no time. There was a failure in the timing system.
Right, okay.
I had no time. It didn't really worry me. The bike was going so well, I felt I could keep doing this all day, no problem. I did it 5 other times, 6 times in a row, and they never got a time on any of the runs. Danny did his return run and did another 170 mile an hour run. So you must have 2 consecutive runs for a record, 1 in each direction. So at that stage, after 7 runs, I developed a problem with the engine. The engine lost speed, and that was the end of it for me. I had lost on the day. I'd gone faster 6 times, and I knew it, and everybody else knew it, but the time clock didn't say it.
Yeah, I suppose in a way then you had to keep your mouth shut, but you might have been down, but you certainly weren't out. And I think you went off to Elvington a few weeks later and you set a record there.
Yeah, I just kept my mouth shut at the time. I felt there was no point, but I was quite happy at the same time because I knew I could do it any time then that I wanted. Just to sort out the little problem we had and come back. I could do it any time I wanted. So we went off to Elvington in England and broke the world record, 1000cc flying mile record for the first time in Elvington in October of that year. But that was no good. Yeah. I wanted the Irish land speed record.
No good, you kind of say that, you kind of dismiss it as it were, but the no good included a speed of 207 miles per hour. That must be frightening.
It's not very nice. Not on a home built bike. Funny when you ride fast motorbikes, different bikes have different characteristics at different speeds. On that bike, you could ride at 170 miles an hour, and it was Sunday afternoon drive. But you go over 170, over 180, and life changes completely. Then you're into a different era, different part of space completely at that stage.
You need to be at one with the bike, so to speak, because if you're not, you're somewhere else.
If you're not, you're somewhere else. Yeah, but it's you're just determined, you're driven, you know what you have to do, and you go out and you do it. Nothing is going to stop you. That's what it comes down to.
I suppose, we spoke earlier about the Indy 500 and what it takes when the guys are up near the wall and whatever, and their foot is nearly locked on the accelerator. It's something similar in your case.
It is. The throttle's flat out. That's it. You can do no more.
You certainly don't have time to look at the scenery anyway, do you?
No, you don't. You don't. And that's even more so when I moved into drag racing. Once I finished with the speed records, then I concentrated on the drag racing, and the horsepower of the bikes is very high.
Right, Elvington was done and dusted, and you had a record, but you still wanted the Carrigrohane Straight. So a year later, you returned, but there wasn't that much opposition. Perhaps you'd tell me.
There was no opposition at the time, because I had run the speeds in England, and there was nothing there could compete with my motorcycle at that stage, and everybody knew it. It was faster than the Formula 1 cars of the time, and was faster than any of the motorcycles. There was nothing coming, like the top speed at the time of the top bikes was about 170 miles an hour on the top racing bikes.
The FIA personnel were in Cork that day, and the timing worked. So tell me, when the timing clicked, What was the speed?
The top speed on the straight road was just over 300 kph, 303 kph was 192 miles an hour on the top speed. The average speed was 184.10, which is 298 kph. So we all went home happy that day, Martin.
Well, I'm sure you didn't go home straight away. So the minute, you knew that the green light was given to your time, you must have been ecstatic.
I was, but I was still determined because at that time I was looking to break 200 miles an hour on the straight road. I'd got to 192 at that stage, but I wanted 200. So we had the road booked for 3 days. So after the first day, we had the records. We got the world record for the flying mile, and we got the Irish land speed record on the first day. But I was determined that we wanted to go for 200, and so we said, no, we're not finished yet. We're going again. Right. So we went on the third day. The first day was Tuesday. Last day was the Thursday. We ran again on the Thursday. We didn't make the 200, but we broke the Irish land speed record a second time, and we broke the world flying mile record a second time as well on the second day, and we were happy with that.
I'm sure you were, and I suppose it was an ambition to do it, but it was the culmination of many years' work. And as you said, people like Denis Collins were a key to it, and your sponsors, because you certainly couldn't have done it on your own.
No, without Denis's help, it would have been impossible. Without the sponsors' help, it would have been impossible. But it would also have been impossible without the bike.
After setting the record, you kind of went in a different direction with your bikes then?
Yeah, I went into drag racing. I actually retired from racing for a while, and my speed record bike had its last run on the Carrigrohane Straight in 1984 when Denis Collins rode it. After all he'd been through, I promised him that he could use the bike for an event. So. And
you weren't at all a bit nervous that anything would come to grief on the bike because you trusted Denis as well?
I knew Denis was a great rider.
Yeah.
Denis is a fantastic rider, and we knew the bike inside out at that stage. Now, Denis wasn't used to riding it, obviously. It was his first time in any event on it. So we got out there and we got stuck into the event, and there were cars and motorcycles. This was a kilometre sprint on the straight road again. Cars and motorcycles. So coming up to the very last run of the day, there was a car ahead of Denis by about 0.1 of a second. And that wasn't acceptable. So Denis was given the G up, put out the bike again, and won the event.
Your record achieved. Do you think you got the publicity you deserve from it, and did people recognise you from there on? I mean, I suppose, at the finish you had to take off the helmet and everybody knew what Mel Nolan's face was like rather than with a helmet on.
Well, we had a fantastic publicist with National Aluminium, which is Barbara Wallace from Wexford, and she ensured that we got fantastic coverage on all the national media. So we had, I can't remember how many radio shows I did, but very many, and every newspaper all over the country and every magazine gave vast coverage to it. Motorcycle News in England gave us two full pages. Their editor, Norrie White, came over to see the event here on the straight road and gave it coverage as a world record.
And I suppose at events, certainly within Cork, you and the bike were part of publicity events, for months and months after. We
were for a long time. Like even today, like people come over to me now and again and say, "I remember it. I was there." It was one of these iconic events. I think it was an eerie. There was an eerie feel to it on the day because of the hour of the morning, and you were by the river with the mist rising off the river, the dead calm of the early morning, and thousands of people lined up on both sides of the road. It was an incredible atmosphere.
And I suppose add in the sound of that bike going all the way down the Carrigrohane Straight.
Yeah.
It was just
echoing through the valley, the sound of the engine.
It's like a fighter plane,
I didn't notice that.
It's great great to look back at your achievements, and in particular the land speed record. But I suppose, like every athlete, you would love to see your record broken. Do you think it's possible in this day and age?
Oh, I think it's more than possible, Martin, and I'm putting it up to anybody out there now. There are several people have cars and several people have motorcycles that are quite capable of breaking that record. And my challenge is get out there and do it.
Back in 1981, you got a lovely trophy for winning or for creating the Irish land speed record. You might just show it to us there. And I
Yes.
suppose and that's 40 years in your possession. I think it's time it has a new home. It's probably the ideal platform for Cork City Council to get involved and maybe begin planning for having a new attempt on the Irish land speed record back on the Carrigrohane Straight, whether it's in the next few years or even before we get to 2030. Mel, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. I know you've derived great success and satisfaction from having the land speed record since 1981, but I think it's time to find a new home.
The cup is here. Come and get it.